Right, thanks for coming everyone, making it through the rain and protests and whatever else. So welcome to Social Scholar. This session's about taking research into schools, very ably presented by our colleague Peter Jones of the IHR. So the Social Scholar series is basically a series of public seminars aimed mainly at academics and others working in related sectors, exploring different ways of being social with research. So we've had sessions on exhibitions, and this one's about schools, we've had digital humanities, and various other things of that nature. We're actually going to have a little bit of a hiatus in the series after this session while we get things lined up for the autumn. We'll be starting again in September. The format is basically we have our speaker who's going to talk about half an hour, and then we'll open up for questions and discussion after that. So obviously try and think of things that you want further clarification on, or just things that you can add to the discussion. So yeah, I'll hand over to Peter. So Peter is a lecturer in urban history in the Centre for Metropolitan History in the IHR. His current research is on street commerce and popular culture in the 19th century, and he's working on a monograph called Crossing the Bridges, which explores tensions in popular mass leisure and Victorian improving institutions in South London. And he's also the lead organiser of the Literary London conference and seminar series. The conference is coming up in June, and it's on fantastic London, dream, speculation and nightmare. Sounds very intriguing. And he's going to be talking today about his work with the Brilliant Club, which some of you may have heard of. Takes academics into secondary schools, I believe. Again, it's South London, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah,
Mostly. Bit of North London, but
cool. Over to you.
okay. Thanks very much, Michael, and thanks for inviting me. It was great to be asked to talk about this topic, and that's something that I've reflected on quite a lot. Since my PhD, I've been working at the Brilliant Club. I don't work there anymore, but it was something that I think really shaped my career and my own conception of my social status, not social status, my professional status, and well, perhaps it's better to say my professional identity, I suppose. For a long time, I was working in various part-time roles for American study abroad, for higher education. And then this outreach came along rather unexpectedly, and working for this charity wasn't something I expected to do, but I found it very enriching, and it kind of informed my own research and practice and pedagogy, and that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about today. So yeah, my own career, I think, has been shaped by public engagement activities to a degree, and so excuse me if this talk is rather self-reflective, and it's really with a view to thinking about research culture and the way that these types of activities can be embedded within that research culture. I don't think it's a simple question. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging and recognising that the professional incentives to engage in public engagement for scholars are not always manifold, and we're often, I think, there's a lot of lip service done to engaging in public outreach, but it's not necessarily something that always opens up in every institutional context, and it might not be something that is always that easy to do. So I'll be, as well as reflecting on some of the real positives, I think, of engaging in this kind of activity, I'm also going to explore some of the limits as well, and perhaps some of the problems we might face when we're trying to see public engagement and outreach as embedded in the research culture of our universities and research institutions. So I'm interested in the ways that public engagement might enrich and inform the research culture of universities. And I think some of the reasons that universities I'd like to explore some of the reasons that universities might want to sort of incentivise and encourage public engagement activities and make them kind of central to their strategic goals, rather than treating them as something that's merely a peripheral element, a kind of bolt-on for the main research agendas. I think this work of bringing public engagement to somewhere that's more central in the research culture is happening. But I think it's kind of important to keep thinking about ways we can bring it into a more central place into our lives as scholars or people who work in universities or wherever you're coming from. So, as well as expanding on these net benefits, I'd like to suggest the governments and research councils might have some ulterior objectives which can stifle the richness of outcome for scholars participating and coordinating in outreach schemes. So it can seem that these agendas are very central, but it can be quite difficult, I think, to find ways to incorporate this into your research activity. And on occasion, we might need to encourage or embark on outreach schemes which enrich the research culture of our departments and institutes, rather than merely seeking to acquiesce to the intentions of our funders, our funding councils, our revenue streams. Sometimes it's a good idea, I think, if we run pilots, if we put together projects that can really show the funders where to go, to say, look, this is really interesting, you might be interested in this. So sometimes I think a lot of the time we are working within the expectations of research councils and funding bodies, but we need to think a little bit more. Sometimes we can also move outside that framework, think creatively, do something different, get out onto the streets, leave the seminar room or the office behind, and give something a go, and it might lead to something, I think, or that's at least something that I've found. So I thought it would be useful to begin with the definition of public engagement, and this is the definition that's given by Peckham. So it says, for the purposes of this initiative, the term public engagement covers a wide range of activities. Any good public engagement activity should involve specialists listening to and developing their understanding of and interacting with non-specialists. It covers schemes that involve non-specialists in the work of higher education institutions and research institutes and centres, and can include participatory processes and activities in museums, art festivals and science centres. However, it does not include activities where the primary purpose is to generate approval or acceptance of the institution, such as might be carried out by an organisation's public relations department, or to recruit students, for example, through open days. The term public includes individuals, groups, young people and their families who do not currently have a formal relationship with an HEI through teaching, research or knowledge transfer, but who may have an interest in these activities. So I think there's a couple of interesting things about this definition that stand out for me. That is that something key here about the interaction between specialists and non-specialists, between the formal structures of tertiary education and those individuals and communities for whom universities might find hard to reach. It is interesting, though, that schools aren't mentioned in this. This surely is the bedrock of higher education in some senses, And I suppose it's kind of intriguing that this doesn't come up. There's also a second point here, and that's that there is a tension between the branding of the university, that is the marketing of the university's social value, and the engagement objectives that try to appeal to audiences that the kind of glossy prospectuses and the brochures can't reach, or at least that's the idea. But I think there's it's interesting that there's tension that's raised in this definition from Peckham. It's also the case that this definition does preserve some sense of obstruction that needs to be removed so that knowledge and expertise of the specialists can flow outwards to communities who lack this apparatus and access to cultural capital. So there is this assumption of a kind of flowing outwards, although there is mentions of sort of listening to and developing understanding. The assumption is that there's a kind of centre of specialism, and there needs to be an apparatus that can allow that specialism to kind of filter out into the community. There are more recent definitions, and I think ones that are perhaps more useful for the purposes of this paper. This is one here from the NCCPE, that's the National Coordinating Centre for Public Engagement. And the National Coordinating Centre for Public Engagement are interested more in the kind of mutuality and reciprocity that can exist between higher education institutions and society at large. So they're interested in that more explicitly. So I'm just going to just need to bring up my timer there. Okay. And so recent definitions have tended to place this emphasis on sort of shared knowledge, and also on the kind of community and civic portion of this kind of work. And it's that particular part of the kind of engagement network that I'm interested in today, and that I'm going to talk a little bit more about today. So here's the definition that is given by the National Coordinating Centre. So they say public engagement describes myriads of ways in which the activity and benefits of higher education and research can be shared with the public. Engagement is by definition a two-way process, so there it's a slightly different casting of it, involving interacting and listening with the goal of generating mutual benefit. So yes, this sort of interest in mutual benefit for the public good. So on one hand we have engagement, which is in accord with the ideals of Enlightenment thought, I suppose. It's about promoting the public good, letting research findings filter out to the community. And there's a recognition, I suppose, that this has some net goals of boosting recruitment, student recruitment, and widening participation. On the other hand, strategy documents can make quite vague comments about the way that outreach might become embedded within a broader research culture. So this, for instance, is the public engagement statement for the SAS website. The School of Advanced Studies is uniquely placed to play a leading role in facilitating public engagement activity in the humanities. So one of the interesting things about SAS, I think, is that it is a kind of leader in public engagement. And we can look at kind of recent recruitment of a professor in public understanding as a kind of evidence of driving this area forward and of our unique identity as an institution, I think. So higher education institutions often struggle to identify how engagement practice can shape its own research culture. And I think SAS kind of offers a model for how that might happen. But it is interesting nonetheless that this kind of mission for public engagement isn't reflected so much in the strategic goals of the School of Advanced Studies, with strategic ambitions which you can see here. I mean, there is a loose mention of outreach as a form of gaining recognition for research or driving impact. But there isn't the same focus, I think, on engagement as something that can shape research culture. So I think what's interesting here is you have a kind of split between public engagement seen according to its didactic function, the way that knowledge is being taken out to the community, and outreach program. And so it's got the idea of a technology which is put in place as a means of disseminating the unchanging specialist knowledge that is the university's stock in trade. And I suspect there are many of you who feel that despite their apparent altruism, that engagement efforts can be ancillary to and a kind of distraction from the work of building a serious academic career. And this reticence is partly dictated with these by conditions and this split between the kind of didactic idea of public engagement and a slightly vague intention to try and embed public engagement within research culture. So just to summarise then, I think there's this split between this didactic approach and one that tries to embed research within the culture of the university. So how can we link the culture which works tirelessly towards pleasing research councils in the rarefied pursuit of excellence, recognition and impact, while maintaining this apparently unrelated focus on building a didactic apparatus to promote the public good? How can we kind of bring these kind of strands together? I want to turn to a couple of examples drawn from my own experience, and I really would encourage others to try out the type of activity which the NCCPE calls partnership or blended public engagement. What it means by that is working with institutions who already have already reach into the community, already work with schools, with educators and with public institutions. I think that's because building the pedagogical apparatus to transfer our knowledge to a non-specialist audience can provide a way of reinvigorating research that can be somewhat suffocated by professional expectations. So I'm going to turn now to talk a little bit about the Brilliant Club, which Michael mentioned earlier. So Brilliant Club is a charity that exists to increase the numbers of pupils from underrepresented backgrounds progressing to highly selected universities. And they do this by mobilising the PhD community to share its experience with state schools. So how that actually works on the ground is someone like me will go to an interview and I propose a kind of course or a programme based on my own research that might be taught to students between Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 5 and 6, so sort of 13 to 18-year-olds. And this is with a view to giving students a kind of sample of what it's like to go to university, but they also get to have a launch trip, and at the end of the course they have a graduation, which is quite fun, because they get to go to Oxford or the University of London, and they have a graduation, and they have a kind of experience of the grading structure, the pedagogical methods of universities. So why are they doing this then? Well, and partly explained by the statistics at the top here. So primarily educated A-level pupils, about 64% progress to a highly selective university. A-level pupils from non-selective state schools, 19% progress to a highly selective university. And I think the statistic is really staggering. State school A-level pupils who are eligible for pupil premium, only 11% progress to a highly selective university. So these programs are deliberately targeted at these non-selective schools with underrepresented groups. They're now in hundreds of schools, not just in London, but across Britain. And I found this experience to be a really enduring one. I thought what I'd do is just talk about some of the challenges I faced and the way that I got to a position where I was reflected on my own research practice, I suppose, and how this experience brought me on to kind of new pathways, took my research in directions I didn't expect. So early on in this course, the first school I taught at was in Peckham Rye. It's called Harris Academy, East Dulwich. And I was teaching a group of 6 girls. And in my first tutorial, I kicked off with a challenging passage from a novel which was deliberately directed towards a high reading age pupil. So it's worth saying that so this is the programme, just before I move on, just to say it's the Scholars Programme is the thing I was participating in. And also just worth mentioning that they've got a new programme now which places researchers into schools. It gives them teacher training, but you have 1 day a week to conduct your research. And so it's the Scholars Programme I was participating in. This is the course pack that I designed here. The text is a little bit unclear there, but this is called it's got scrambled. But the course is called The Story of South London, and the idea was that we'd look at the kind of local area, the cultural history of the area where this school was based, look at various kind of cultural junctions like Brixton, Peckham, the Crystal Palace and others, to, I suppose, engage the students in their local environment to an extent. So in my first tutorial, I kicked off with this challenging passage, and it was from George Gissing's The Netherworld, which was published in 1889. It tells the story of the inhabitants of a Clerkenwell slum who were beset by poverty, unemployment and poor living conditions. The passage which we looked at was from a chapter entitled Yo Saturnalia, which follows Penelope Candy and Bob Hewitt as they travel south via train with a number of bank holiday day trippers to the Crystal Palace, which was then located in Sydenham. So I set a homework exercise, which was targeted at tracing the kind of rhetorical form of George Gissing's narration, trying to get them to think about tone, the way it was delivered, and ask the students to go away and research the meaning of any terms that they found tricky, such as antiquity or Saturnalia. And so they had to go away and kind of research what those difficult words meant. And there were also sort of helpful boxes located around the text to kind of help them tune in, and a glossary as well, so they could do some research from that. They were asked to evaluate how this exercise had enriched their understanding of the passage when they came back the next week. The hope was that this would help them explore how Gissing's cultured language serves to separate the educated sensitivity and taste of an implied spectator from the experience of a low, vulgar bank holiday crowd. So this was the way they're casting the passage. However, as you're probably guessing, perhaps unsurprisingly, things didn't quite go to plan. During my class, the whole group flatly declared that they did not get the passage and that they didn't seem to have read it. So I sort of have a mounting sense of panic at this point, and this quickly dissipated when I realised that this lack of understanding could be partly explained by a kind of strategic bluff on the part of my students. A kind of opening gambit, really. They were sort of testing me out. They started addressing me as Dr. Pete, which was interesting. Dr. Pete, what's this all about? You know, kind of. And it became clear quite quickly that many had read the piece, in fact, and it's interesting to kind of compare this strategy with the undergraduates who do the complete opposite and try and fake it kind of all the way to the bank. They were quite honest, you know, about the fact that they just thought this was, you know, they just didn't get it. So all of the pupils had grappled to some extent with the passage, but actually what I found was something about Gissing's supercilious tone and the kind of rhetorical flourishes had left them cold. We would painstakingly define each term again and again, but interest kept switching onto another topic, and I found that fascinating. So why was there a man wearing a cardboard nose and flame-coloured whiskers, for instance? Where would this eat? Where were the fireworks coming from? Were Pennyloaf and Robert in love? Very important. So we looked, for instance, at this 1886 painting as a means of illustrating the spectacle, consumption, and consumer culture and cultural purpose of the Crystal Palace. But we ended up spending more time discussing the way people were misusing the space, or and the interaction between the man dressed as a lion with a painted red face and the child next to him, sort of retreating. And also we ended up talking about how the building resembled a fun fair. So it took a kind of direction that I didn't expect quite quickly, and totally against my, you know, lesson plan and intentions. So my point here is, I think that there's a kind of productive, getting productively sidetracked is something that's very important to understanding my role in these schools, and finding that the text I thought I was familiar with, the series of questions were produced by these students, and that I found myself going down sort of unusual pathways in pursuit of this. How do we look at this one?
You're on half now.
Okay, right. Okay, well, I'll try and wrap up then. So, yeah, sure. So I think what I was interested in here was that these students didn't respond in a kind of anticipated way. So one of the things that I did, for instance, was to talk to them about this. Is anybody aware of what this drawing denotes, or what we're showing, what plans are?
New plan.
That's right, yeah. So this plan was ultimately cancelled, but at the time I was running these sessions, I was able to talk to the students, a couple of whom lived in the area, about this plan and kind of what they thought about it. And I thought, you know, this might be a kind of good thing for the Crystal Palace Park. It was a little bit of a kind of strange mix of land uses there. But I told my pupils this, and they kind of universally and without pause pronounced it to be a kind of dodgy idea, which would suck up investment, which was badly needed elsewhere, for cheap housing, youth clubs, local charities and food banks. And so these recipient students had clearly a kind of locally embedded knowledge that they could bring to bear on this problem. And they exposed this design for what it was, a kind of extinct idea, a nostalgic and facile fantasy. And I realised what I was slightly doing was I was rehearsing the educative programmes of people like sort of Matthew Arnold and perhaps Gissing, who saw the South London as this kind of empty space. I was the scholar arriving there with my specialist knowledge, and I was expecting, I suppose, just to explain everything to the students. But what I found was, in fact, the opposite, and these students were kind of filling in for me. They were raising a lot more questions about these spaces and spaces that I thought I knew. And I suppose what I learned from this is it's important to see pupils or the subjects of engagement as kind of co-partners or pathfinders beating back the undergrowth and tackling problems that haven't already been solved for them. These pupils really enjoyed the fact that they felt like they were on a kind of cold case. You know, it wasn't something that was all wrapped up and solved. I could say to them, you can be detectives, you know, you can play the role of a particular character. Perhaps it's just one final example I wanted to show, and that's an example of an exercise that I put together for a project in North London, which I put together with a teacher, and this encouraged students to kind of take on a role, in this case as a highwayman. They each had a different name at the beginning of the programme, and then they were asked to sort of inhabit that role. One of the things I suppose that I learned is that we don't, sometimes when we're looking at our subject, when we're trying to pass out and kind of clarify, explain our research, we also have to inhabit other roles. The roles that our professions prescribe for us, sometimes we kind of need to leave them behind. And I think what these pupils showed me was that was something really important, that you could see things differently if you took on the role of the man dressed as a lion in Crystal Palace, or you took on the role of Charlie Chaplin or a highwayman to try and reconstruct history. And I think what I'd end with is that fact that we have to embrace this kind of plasticity of role accommodation, that we have to be able to take on different roles as academics, and that it's very healthy if we do so. And I think public engagement is partly about that, partly about moving past those kind of narrow professional categories. There's quite a lot of the other examples I've looked at, I wanted to look at there, but I hope that that's given some inspiration for you. And if any of you have any questions about the Brilliant Club or about how you might get involved in these charities, then please do ask, and I'll help. Hopefully I can expand on that. Thanks very much.